from the lifeboats. We then got the transmission a little less than 2 hours later. Titanic has sank. So here in Halifax, we will be forever connected to the legacy because we have 150 of the parish souls buried here in our city. We have 121 at the Fairview Lawn Cemetery. We'll now finish an understanding of our Titanic connection on the first thing in the morning. Can you imagine this is how we're starting our day? Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to one of my very favorite places to come and spend time, the Fairview Lawn Cemetery. Come for a walk. Our connection to the Titanic is incredible. So we're going to move forward, and I'll point out some of the things that I see. Now that's a lot of tuna in the can. They wanted to just say no. Just do what you want to do with them. But the city of Halifax decided that they needed something better. White Star Lines did not want to give anybody a coffin. Put him in a bag, put him in the ground. They refused to pay for a burial to be dug, a grave. So we actually just had to dig a trench. We had to lay all the bodies out. They refused to pay for a stone. And then finally, when we held their feet to the fire, they agreed. Well, fine, get stones. What is a natural stone of Halifax that isn't going to cost us any money? Granite. Our entire province is built of granite, limestone, and shale. They finally agreed that they would allow us to put a stone. But what we weren't allowed to do was mention Titanic. What we weren't allowed to do was mention anything of the ship. We were only allowed to write on the stone a name, if we knew it, the number of the body as it was pulled from the water, and the date of the tragedy. They insisted we even burn all of their clothes, all of their artifacts, everything they had in their coffins. The very first man I will just have a little chat about is Luigi Gotti. Luigi Gotti was the maitre d' of the first-class restaurant. He was a very well-known society man as he owned his own restaurants through London, England. When Luigi Gotti was taken from Olympus and put on Titanic, he went not so willingly. In order to get him to agree to all, they actually had to let him hire all of his family, all of his good friends, and people that he had worked with for many years. Luigi Gotti was a father to a young boy, and as he sailed away, this young boy had given him this little teddy bear. And he said, "Daddy, every night before you go to bed," he was the son of a captain. And when he lost his life, his wife was devastated. And she thought he deserved more than just this. She wanted everyone to know who he was. So she applied, "Please, let me have a stone." Now, J. Bruce Ismay was on Titanic. How is it that he managed to get into a lifeboat? Dr. Barry. Oh, Dr. Barry, calling for me already. He's only now 10 minutes. When James Cameron actually decided to make the movie, he actually came to Halifax and he had a meeting with the Titanic Society. I'm a member of this society. And it was upon agreement that he would never use names of any of the people buried here, out of respect. Well, he was sitting at a pub one night, and there was a little sailor that was sitting there, a little older. I think he was described as having not all of his teeth. But when the conversation came about, he said, "Sir, my name is James," and he said, "I'm Jack." Wow, what a great name. I mean, Ron is a good name too. You know, we got Barry here, that's a good name, but not really commanding. Pulled from the water, he had a beautiful emerald ring in its pocket. His family realized very quickly that they were unable to move his body all the way to New South Wales. So they decided to leave him here with us under the Celtic cross. He was actually supposed to be all alone here in this center, but bodies kept coming. They actually were still finding bodies up to 6 to 8 months later. The last body that they found was somewhere close to Finland, and they feel that it was a body from Titanic. We only have 3 women that are buried here, and 2 of them are right here. Jenny Louisa Henriksen and Vendemalie Heinemann. When their bodies were pulled from the water, they had absolutely no identification on them. That's why their names are not on the front of the stones. In the 1900s, we ladies, we would do something that would be able to identify us, or should I say, our undergarments. We would embroider our initials on our tunics that we wore underneath our clothing. Our pantaloons would also have them. So when they found the clothing and they noticed the embroidery stitching, they at that point in time went to the manifest, and it matched up to who these 2 ladies would have been after the fact. We're going to move up through here and away from this group. Hey. Many, if any, bones would be left, would have all joined each other at the bottom, remembering nobody was in a coffin. Everybody was just laid out in a body. We'll come on up here so you can see many of them. By features that family members came forward to identify him himself. John Law Hume. He was in the band, and yes, the band played right to the very end. They could hear them playing from the lifeboats. John Law Hume was a 21-year-old Irish man again, because the Irish were the workers. He actually played the violin like an angel. When he did his first strums, they hired him immediately. When can you start? This is when we need you to be here. You need to have a tuxedo. The Cable Wharf ship was hired to go out into the frigid waters to collect the perished remains of all of the souls. On the 4th body that was pulled from the water was a child that fit in their hands. They never thought that this was what they were going to have to see. They never imagined this would be what they would do. And nor did they imagine that the White Star Lines would turn their backs on this babe and say, put him in the ground in a bag. Forget about him. Well, the Mackie Bennett crew were not going to have that. They stepped up with no money. They were meager people. But they stepped up and they purchased a little coffin for this little babe. They purchased the stone for this babe. They carried his body all the way from the Halifax waterfront. And they purchased a little amulet to put around his neck, and they had it engraved with our babe. Now for years, we tried to identify or tried to find out who the babe was. We positively identified him at one point in time as Ino Panula, a little Finnish boy. It came to fruition that he was not Ino Panula at all. We thought he might have been Elma Paulson's son Gosta, but that was not true either. So years and years and years they pass. He always had a family, it was us. But in the 1990s, something changed our world forever when it comes to identification. DNA. DNA. And we put an appeal out to all Is there anybody that may think that they have a connection to our babe? And people came forward. But we weren't going to do anything with the babe until we had some type of proof that possible it was a part of his family. And then sure enough, a family came forward. DNA samples were sent over, and at that point in time, we made the decision, exhume the child. We exhumed him not knowing what we would find, and as we opened the top of that little white casket, there were still teeth and arm bone. In 2006, the unknown child, our babe, was positively identified as Sidney Leslie Goodwin. He was on board Titanic with his other 5 siblings, his mother and father, as they were headed to New York, where his dad was to be an architect. They were headed to New York for the American dream. We are only aware that out of the entire family, the babe is the only one that is here. None of his other family have been identified or were brought to Halifax. Here's where the White Star Lines again had to play devil's advocate for us. This gentleman, not the President of the United States, but he was one of the bigwigs for White Star Lines. And when they realized what the Mackie Bennett crew had done for the babe, they said, well, he must have the same stone. He must have it bigger. You must place it right next to the child. How is it that they felt that their very own were so much more important than the others? But that was the White Star Lines. And after Titanic, they were no more. Happily for us. So I keep them busy. Alma Paulsen. Alma was a 29-year-old Swedish woman. She was married to Niels Paulsen. They actually were going through such a tough time in Sweden because the mining industries had failed. The food was starting to dwindle. Life was incredibly difficult. So Niels had made the decision that he was going to leave Sweden, he was going to leave his family behind, he was going to go to Chicago, where he was going to become a tramcar conductor. He was gone for 2 years before he actually had enough money saved to bring his family over. And they always used to comment, Niels was the type of man that he would skip breakfast. They would say, Niels, are you having lunch today? I had a big breakfast this morning. No lunch required. It's another penny in the jar to bring my family to me. 2 years he waited. Look how old. He'd barely even known his youngest child. When Titanic struck the iceberg, he immediately heard it. He gathered his belongings, his information on his family. He went to New York City. He stood in multiple lines. I'm here for my family. Mr. Paulsen, your family are not here. I'm here for my family. Mr. Paulsen, your family is not here. I'm here for my family. And finally, somebody looked at him and they said, Mr. Paulsen, your family were third class. They probably didn't even know it struck an iceberg. Your family is gone. He immediately was devastated. He had a little bit of a breakdown. And when he recovered and he realized that this is what they had to offer his family, he told the White Star Lines what they could do with their stone. And he brought his jar out one more time and he went to work to pay for a stone for his wife. Alma is the only one that is here. The 4 children were never recovered. The sad part about it is he never even bought them a ticket on Titanic. They were on another ship, but because of a coal shortage, they moved majority of the third-class passengers over to Titanic without them even knowing what was going to happen. So she never should have been there. Their children would have survived, as well as the majority of the third-class passengers had times been different. They never. It's just who I am. I'm a strange one, that's for sure. Charles is saying, yeah, no kidding. Thank you so much. Hello, husband.